Good afternoon, this is Tom Christie back in the painting studio, and this will be session 4 of painting a common loon. And I've made my loon out of a palm frond. The body is a palm frond, the head is tupelo. If you haven't seen the carving series, I've got a whole how-to carving series on how I created the carving for this decoy. And now we're on session 4 of painting the decoy. We've gotten it to this point. I want to add these markings on the cape and back. They're going to be similar to these on the scapulars, but a little bit smaller. And then we've got a lot of work to do just to go through the white areas of the bird and put some feather detail on those areas. And if we have time, we'll get to the head and add a little iridescent. We've got these white markings to put on the bird. Beautiful bird, and I'm learning a lot as I do this first loon that I've ever painted and carved. So if you're enjoying my channel and getting value out of it, please hit the subscribe button. That helps me out. It's free to you, doesn't cost anything, as I continue to build this channel with free resources for people that want to carve decoys or wildfowl. Thanks for coming back. Let's get started. Bring the camera in, and we have a little bit of layout work to do on the back here to start. All right, the cape area is very similar to the scapulars. There's going to be these 2 dots side by side with a quill in between. The feathers are smaller than they are up here, so the dots are still going to be rectangular in nature as opposed to the dots in other areas of the bird. And they're going to be very small up here near the neck, get larger as you go back. So these markings are going to be very small, kind of similar to what we did up here. And then gradually get larger, but they don't get as large as these big dots on the scapulars. And I've got these arcs drawn, which kind of give us a guideline because these feathers kind of lay in an arc position. And if I were just to sketch a single feather, it'd probably be something like that. And this is a series of feathers with some overlapping going on. So we're not going to see 2 dots every time, just like here. So I'm going to use I'm not going to chalk pencil everything. I want to use my black, carbon black, to kind of outline where I'm going to put the feathers in here. I said I wasn't going to use my chalk pencil, but look what I'm doing. Give me a little bit of a guideline. So some overlapping, kind of like the roof of a house where the shingles overlap each other a little bit. So let's get the carbon black, mark those out, and then work on our dots. Just got my carbon black, and you can see I'm not necessarily following my chalk lines all the time. I use those to kind of get a concept, but as I nail these down, kind of thinking through in my mind how I want the feather patterns to show up. So kind of varying these overlapping areas. I'm going to flip the decoy around so I can get up close to the head here and neck. When you look at a bird, this bird from a distance, you really can't
see much delineation between the feathers because they're dark and they're laid in here very tightly, and there's a lot of overlapping going on. So this is more for my benefit to kind of give myself a guideline as I'm painting in the dots, so that I don't end up with just a perfect row of dots. Every row is perfectly spaced, because it really is not that way on the bird. There's variation going on, and as I mentioned before, there's overlapping of feathers that change the pattern of dots as we go. Now I'm going to dry the black, get rid of my chalk marks, and then we can start with the white. I'm going to use my scrubber again, same process that we used on the other areas of the bird, and go in and scrub a little bit of a blend. I'm keying in on these separations that I've put in place and just blending so that it's not just a hard line. These will kind of fade into the background as we add the dots, but it gives a little more structure to the underlying feather patterns. So I'm just blending from the edge in. And we already have a blend that we put in place on the end of each arc. So these are really just to further develop that. Now I've got my off-white on a brush and starting up at the neck. I'm just going to put some small markings, kind of tying into these, gradually getting a little larger. Maybe start with 2 there. Keep them very small as they approach the neck there. And then they're going to get a little larger as we go back into the cape. I'm going to put 2 dots on each of these. And again, this will take at least 3 coats to cover over this black. And this again is very repetitious, so I'm just going to show you a portion of what I'm doing. See, I've got a feather marked here, so I'm going to focus in that area and make sure I have 2 dots on that feather. This one is under the other one, so only 1 there and just a partial here. 1 here. This is another overlapping feather, so just a partial there. 1 here, maybe just the edge of 1 there. So you can see I'm kind of tying into the patterns here. I drew my arcs to tie into these, but they have their own arc shape themselves. These are a little smaller than these, but I'll work to make sure they have a rectangular nature to them before it's all said and done after the 3 coats. So that's probably enough. I'm going to do that back to this point right here, and then it transitions from there. These are overlapping feathers with these smaller feathers on the rump underneath. All right, I've got those laid in, and now I want to put a few splits in these scapular feathers, and it's always been kind of unusual to me when I look at a loon because the splits are kind of very harsh looking. I'm going to err on the side of putting a few splits in and not go overboard. But with the 2 dots and the quill between, we have to remember where there is a feather with 2 dots showing, like here, we're going to want to put that's a big split, a split in this direction here, and the split would come from this direction on the other side of the quill. Those 3 feathers of quill are going to be right between the dots. And then some of these, there's only a partial showing, so we got to keep that in mind as we pick the direction of the splits that we want to put in place. That's kind of a long explanation, but I think it is a little tricky because of the pattern in the loon's feathers. We want to make sure we pick that up. See if I'm still in camera. Yep, I'm going to go this way on these that lay along the back, and a couple up in this direction here. So I'll do that throughout the feathers of the back here, and then we can move on to the white breast and belly. Here's just a quick look after I put the splits in all of these white markings and tried to pay attention to the direction of the splits. I think it looks pretty good. Now I want to work on the breast area, and this is meant to be a decoy, so again, it's not a fully decorative bird, so this is where some interpretation comes in. How much detail do I really want to have in a full white area? I definitely want to, looking at the reference, this structure, they're kind of ridged on the bird, and I want to continue that structure around the front of the breast with some brighter whites so that we kind of mirror this structure as it goes on around the front. Hopefully you can see I've chalked in some pencil lines, and then somewhere down here I'm going to want to start converting those into feather tips and take that underneath so that we have some feathering on the belly of the bird, clear back to the rump. So I'm going to use my detail brush, try to get it in the picture here, and I've got some white gesso because it's a little brighter white than my off-white base coat. And I'm going to I don't want these to be stripes or look unnatural, so I'm gonna kind of go in between and create some flow around the front of the breast and tie that flow into these lines. But you can see I'm not just making big long stripes. I think that's going to look not natural, so I'm going to interlock these, and I'm going to pull right out of the lighter stripes here and wrap around and get some nice flow around the front of the breast, if that makes sense. And not try to go with tiny individual feathers on this Confidence Decoy. So I'll work that for a little while and then we'll come back and take a look at it. Just a quick look at that area. Kind of the flow through that area. And then now we'll start picking up some feather structure down here. Using the white gesso again, I'm just starting little arcs. I'm going to carry that up into the front of the breast here. And then carry that down below. The feather's getting larger. And I'm going to do that across the entire underside. I kind of like the look of the combination of the lines that I pulled in and these feather arcs. So I may take those right on up and follow my lines here. This is an example of how things change as you go, and since I've never done a Frond loon before, we're kind of inventing along the way. Okay, I'm going to do the underside. A lot of repetition there, so no need to watch those brush strokes, but we'll come back before I start shading down there. Just a little farther along, and I'm just going down the belly. And just putting arcs in place and tying that up into the side and coming off the keel. Definitely more detail than you need in a confidence decoy that you're going to use in the field. This is a bit of a decorative version of that. It's going to have its service in a cabin on a mantle. It's just a quick look at that belly area after outlining feathers. A lot of feathers down there. All right, now I've got a 1/4 inch angled brush, and I'm going with the white gesso, and I'm going in and following my guidelines here and just scrubbing in a little bit of a blend from the outer from the outer edge of the feather inward. And this brush size kind of lends itself to this. So again, this is pretty repetitive work, but I'm going to go across the entire underside with this approach. And just soften this up. If you notice, when I load my brush, I'm using that to go along the edge, and then if I have a little too much paint in the brush, I'm just doing several edges. And as the brush unloads, then I can come back and scrub in the blend. And I want to scrub these that go up the side. So I'll do that work on the entire belly, and I'm going to do the same thing on the breast feathers up here, up a little ways, and then probably stop as I go on up the breast towards the neck. These are smaller feathers up here, so it doesn't take much. I've got a little carbon black mixed with burnt umber, very little paint on this little angled scrubber, and these feathers right under the tail tend to have a little darker value to them, at least in the reference that I'm looking at. So I'm gonna just carefully scrub that in. We don't need much here, just a little bit of a darker tinge on these right in this area. I mixed a little Nimbus Gray with burnt umber and just a touch of carbon black, and just pulling a few feather edge splits through these to kind of tie it together. Kind of matching that underlying dark value. Just do a couple more back here. Now I'm going to go through the entire underside. I've got the highlighting done with the gesso, and the other thing I did was just pull a clear water brush through everything, again to kind of tone down the bright white and tie everything together. And now I just want to put some random splits in these feathers to finish up the underside. Now I've got a little Nimbus gray mixed with the off-white, so it's just slightly darker value. I'm going to go in these and put some splits. And this will take quite a while, but I'll not try to overdo it, but just add a little additional detail to this feathering underneath. Just a quick view of the splits on the belly, and I also kind of wrap those around and put a little of the gray up in here to indicate some texture up there. I just did a final very thin wash of the original off-white base color with a lot of water and just pulled that over the entire lower section here, and it kind of softened the splits and tied things together. Just a quick look at the breast area with those little markings, and now I'm going to coat the head again with carbon black because the bill took a little punishment during the painting of the rest of the bird. So I'll get that recoated with carbon black, and then we can start on the head. All right, everybody, I think that's a good place to end session 4. I don't want these videos to get longer than a half an hour. So I've actually finished the decoy, little sneak peek ahead. But in session 5, I'll put together the head specific details and how I painted that out. And that's another 25 to 30 minute video. So that'll be session 5. That'll be the final video in this series. We'll get it sealed up, finished, and maybe even floated. We'll see. Until next time, Tom Christie signing out. Thanks for tuning in.